The U.S. Supreme Court has revived a case involving FBI agents smashing through the front door of an Atlanta family's home during a botched raid. It happened back in 2017 when agents went to Trina Martin's house looking for an alleged violent gang member. Problem is, it was the wrong address. Martin sued, but her case was thrown out by a federal judge. Now the Supreme Court is stepping in, opening the door for the case to proceed, at least for now. Courts and legal reporter Zach Schoenfeld joins us to discuss. Zach, tell us more about what happened here and why Martin says her family deserves to be compensated.
Well, the moral of the story here, Drew, is maybe check the street sign or perhaps the house number on the mailbox before you're an FBI SWAT team conducting a house raid in pre-dawn hours. As you mentioned, this all played out in a neighborhood in the suburbs of Atlanta back in October of 2017. Trina Martin, her partner, and her 7-year-old son, they were all home, and they actually thought they were the victims of a home invasion when the FBI breached their front door, and in fact, they detonated a flashbang grenade upon entering. So the couple quickly, they hid in the bedroom closet, the SWAT team found them, they actually threw the man down on the floor and handcuffed him at one point as another officer was pointing a weapon at Miss Martin. And only after all of that did one of the agents find a piece of mail inside the home with the address, and they realized that they had the wrong house. So ever since then, Martin has been trying to get compensation for the federal government for both her injuries and property damages. But the key question in this case all along has been, does federal law permit such a lawsuit?
Break down what exactly the Supreme Court said. Now, why did justices reopen this case, and what do they now want the lower courts to do?
So the first thing to know about this is there's a principle called sovereign immunity that prevents the federal government from being sued without its consent. So that's the starting point for all of this. The second thing to know is a federal law that's called the Federal Tort Claims Act. This is a law that actually provides that consent when someone is injured by a federal employee. And this case grapples with that law's elaborate web of exceptions. In fact, this case actually concerns an exception to one of those exceptions. So pretty convoluted here. When Justice Neil Gorsuch was reading the summary of that opinion today aloud from the bench, he actually told the crowd in the courtroom that he wasn't going to get into all of those details and bore them with them. So I won't either. But the basic takeaway to know is that the Supreme Court said that the lower court in this case approached it wrong when it decided to toss the lawsuit. So now, the justices are sending the case back to that lower court to redo the analysis. It's unclear at this point whether Trina Martin is ever going to eventually succeed and actually get compensation. It's possible that the lower court here still says that even after this new guidance from the justices, the lawsuit still can't continue. Martin actually wanted the Supreme Court to go a little further here so that wouldn't happen. They refused to do so. But still, the Supreme Court handing her a big win as her lawsuit is now alive once again.
Do we know what the timeline is here? Like, when can we start getting some answers? When will the lower court start taking this case back up?
Well, this case has already been going on for years, and now that it's going back to the lower courts, it could be many more years. This is not going on any sort of expedited schedule. So even if Martin wins at the end of the day, it still could be years down the road before she gets a dollar.
All right, switching gears a bit here, President Trump is increasingly relying on emergency declarations to wield power. From the economy to the border to mobilizing troops to quell protests on American soil, Trump is using ambiguity in the definition of emergency to flex the power of the presidency. Zach, walk us through what he's been doing.
This is one of the main through lines that you see as you look across what is now more than 300 lawsuits that have been filed against major Trump administration policies. You see some of these cases actually dealing with actual declarations of national emergencies that Trump has declared under the National Emergencies Act. But even when it's not directly under that law, we've seen the administration really looking at federal statutes across the board and seeing if there's any legal authorities that they can rely on, even in those cases where it requires some sort of emergency or some sort of conditions that have to be met. So for example, in the tariffs case, Trump is citing a law called IEPA that requires him to show that there is some sort of emergency to justify economic sanctions. Trump there has been saying that he believes that trade deficits and the influx of fentanyl are emergencies. So whatever the emergency may be, whether it be tariffs, immigrations, you name it, it's really something that you see the administration doing again and again, is saying that there are all of these emergencies going on, and that's what gives them the legal authority to make all of these sweeping executive actions.
What have courts been saying about all this? Do they think Trump is staying within the bounds of the law, or is he exceeding powers that are granted to the president?
It's been a mixed bag so far, especially in these cases. Many of them remain at early stages, at preliminary and emergency relief stages where there's quite a high bar for the plaintiffs here to clear. So I think it's all really still working its way through the courts, and it's too soon to tell exactly how, broadly speaking, this is all going to turn out. Just take the tariffs case, for example. You have had now 2 federal courts that have blocked the tariffs, but just this week we saw an appeals court lift one of those rulings and extending a lift of that order. So for example, right now, Trump's tariffs are in effect. There's no court order blocking him from implementing them, but really these cases are still progressing and there's still big legal questions. So at least in these early stages, it's a bit of a mixed bag.
Let's talk about Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He's the Maryland father deported to El Salvador. The Trump administration originally said he would never be brought back to the U.S. Then on Friday, he was flown to Tennessee, where he's apparently going to stand trial. What's the latest?
So with these new criminal charges, we now have 2 cases at the same time. You've got his criminal case in Tennessee, where he'll actually be back in court tomorrow for his arraignment, where we expect him to enter a plea, and also some questions there about whether he will be detained. So that's happening in Tennessee with his federal public defenders. But meanwhile, there's still that lawsuit in Maryland that was filed after he was deported to El Salvador back in mid-March. And the question now becomes, does that lawsuit go away now that he's been returned to the U.S. and is facing these criminal charges? And that's what the federal government has been arguing. They have told the judge she needs to stop all of these proceedings that she's been doing to figure out whether she's going to hold the Trump administration in contempt, and saying that this whole case has got to go. But meanwhile, we've seen Kilmar Abrego Garcia's lawyers in that case still try to press ahead. In fact, late last night, they filed a motion for sanctions against the Trump administration, seeking fines. So still now 2 cases, both are going to be proceeding simultaneously.
What are the federal charges?
So the charges in that criminal case, it's 2 charges. The first charge is unlawful transportation of undocumented aliens, and the second charge is conspiracy to transport aliens. So essentially, what he's accused of here is taking more than 100 trips from Texas to other parts of the country, in which he was taking with him migrants who are in the country illegally. So essentially accused of smuggling them not into the country, but once they got across the southern border and into Texas, Abrego Garcia is accused of helping them move through the country.
Is there a chance that he would be released while he awaits trial?
That's one of the big questions we expect to get answered at tomorrow's arraignment. The government, as you might imagine here, is pushing for him to be detained until trial. They have put up a bunch of different arguments. They say he's a flight risk. They've even said that if he's allowed to be out on release, that they have raised concerns that he's going to intimidate witnesses in this criminal case. Now, Abrego Garcia's lawyers have responded pretty forcefully. They say there's no reason to detain him. They are rejecting the notion that he's any sort of flight risk or is going to intimidate any witnesses. But it's really going to be up to this judge at this arraignment to decide, at least for now, whether he remains in custody or whether he will be released.
Do we have any idea of when a trial would actually happen?
I think it's pretty unclear at this point because this case is such in an early stage. We haven't even gotten him to enter his plea yet. It's possible we will get some more clues as to the timeline at tomorrow's arraignment. You can at least expect the judge to lay out some next steps in the case, even if it's not getting a formal trial date quite yet. So I think that timeline, we just don't know quite yet.
You know, I remember the circumstances of this case were that the government could have deported him to another country, just not El Salvador. Now he's back in the U.S. He's facing this trial. If he's guilty, I assume he goes to jail here in the U.S., but what if he's acquitted?
Yeah, so if he's guilty, the government says he should face trial, he should then serve his sentence, whatever that is, and then after that could be deported potentially. They want to deport him back to El Salvador. But as you mentioned, there's still that immigration judge's ruling on the books that prevents him from being removed to El Salvador. That's why he was mistakenly deported. But it does not say that he can't be deported to another country. Now, it's possible if the Trump administration he gets acquitted and the Trump administration tries to deport him to somewhere else, it's possible that you'd see Abrego Garcia bringing up new legal defenses as to why that can't happen. But at least as of now, there is not an order on the books like the one for El Salvador that prevents him from getting removed to those countries. So it really is a possibility here that he could be deported again, even if it's not to El Salvador.
Not an end to this story, but we'll have to continue following it. If people want to keep up with Zach's reporting, make sure to go to thehill.com and to subscribe to the Gavel newsletter for all your latest courts, news, and information. For now, we'll leave it at that. Zach Schoenfeld, thanks so much.
Thanks, Drew.